The Mist of Oakhaven. The Oakhaven ferry terminal was a skeleton of rusted iron and salt-rotted wood, smelling faintly of stagnant brine and dead kelp. The air here didn't circulate, it clung to the skin like a damp, unwanted shroud. Rachel leaned against the hood of their rental car, her eyes fixed on the horizon where Blackwood Island sat like a jagged, black tooth breaking the surface of the gray Atlantic. She tapped her phone screen, the blue light reflecting in her widened pupils. The forums weren't kidding, Rachel murmured, her voice vibrating with a dangerous, electric hum of excitement. There's a spike in missing persons reports dating back to the late 70s. All tied to the island. Not just random wanderers, Sarah. Families. Hikers. A group of surveyors in '94. Sarah stood a few feet back, arms tightly crossed over her chest. She wasn't looking at the horizon. She was watching the town, if one could call the scattering of gray, salt-stripped cottages a town. The windows were dark, boarded up with thick, uneven planks. There were no seagulls crying overhead. The silence was heavy, physical, pushing against her eardrums. It's not a tourist attraction, Rachel, Sarah said, her voice strained. She felt a phantom chill spiderwebbing up her spine. Look at the houses. Nobody lives here because they want to. They live here because they're hiding, or they're stuck. We shouldn't be here. Rachel finally looked up, her smile bright and infectious, oblivious to the oppressive weight Sarah felt. That's exactly why we should be here. Think about it. Everyone else looks at a place like this and runs away. We're the ones who actually pull back the curtain. This is history, Sarah. Unrecorded, dark, secret history. It's a graveyard, Sarah countered, stepping forward and lowering her voice. People don't just go missing 4 decades without a reason. You're acting like this is some fun little scavenger hunt, but the air here, it tastes like copper. It feels like something is watching us from the trees. Rachel laughed, though the sound lacked its usual carefree quality. It echoed too sharply against the rusted terminal walls. She kicked off the car and strode toward a local shopkeeper, a man whose face was etched with so many deep, jagged lines he looked like a topographical map of misery. He was pulling a heavy iron bolt across his door. "Excuse me," Rachel said, her curiosity overriding her social grace. "We're heading over to Blackwood. Any advice on the best landing spot?" The man stopped. He didn't turn around at first. When he finally shifted, his eyes didn't meet Rachel's. They flicked to the dark outline of the island, then darted to Sarah, lingering on her for a heartbeat longer than necessary. His expression wasn't one of fear, but of pity. "The tides are wrong for crossing," the man muttered, his voice gravel and dry rot. "The water, it doesn't flow around the island. It gets sucked in. And the mist? It's not fog. It's hunger." "Hunger?" Rachel tilted her head, her interest piqued rather than dampened. "Metaphorically, I assume." The man turned his back to them, his hand gripping the doorframe so tightly his knuckles turned a waxy white. The Blackwood family didn't leave the island because they died. They left because they ran out of things to feed. Don't go looking for doors that were locked for a reason, girl. The shadows in that manor have long memories, and they've been starving for a very, very long time. The bolt slammed home with a finality that made Sarah flinch. She hurried to Rachel's side, grabbing her arm. "Did you hear him? He's not crazy, Rachel. He's warning us. Can we please, just for once, listen to the warning?" Rachel pulled her arm away, though her expression softened into a mask of placating patience. "He's a local, Sarah. He thrives on the mystery. It's how they keep the island to themselves. If we turn back now, we're just another pair of cowards who let the unknown scare them off. Don't you want to know? Don't you want to be the one who finally figures out what happened to those people?" "No," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "I want to go back to the hotel. I want to have a boring dinner and go to sleep. I don't need to be the one who finds out." I'm happy not knowing. Rachel's gaze shifted back to the island. The mist was beginning to roll off the dark cliffs, curling around the manor like ghostly fingers reaching for the mainland. It was a beckoning, a silent call that seemed to resonate deep within Rachel's chest, pulling at her like a tide. I can't, Sarah, Rachel whispered, more to herself than to her friend. I feel like I've been looking for this place my entire life without even knowing it. It's like a puzzle, and I'm the only one with the piece to finish it. Sarah looked at the island again. The manor was visible now, a grand, crumbling Gothic monstrosity clinging to the cliffside. It looked less like a building and more like a wound on the landscape. She felt a sudden, violent surge of dread, a premonition so sharp it made her gasp for air. It wasn't just the fear of the unknown, it was the chilling, absolute certainty that they were walking into a trap, not one built by the locals, but one set by the house itself. You're not doing this for knowledge, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a harsh, desperate whisper. You're doing this because you're bored, and you want something to make you feel alive. But look at it, Rachel. Look at that house. That is not a place that makes people feel alive. That is a place that consumes. Rachel didn't answer. She was already walking toward the makeshift dock where a small, battered fishing boat bobbed on the black water. She moved with a strange, fluid grace, her eyes locked onto the island. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, the cold wind whipping her hair across her face. She looked back at the town, then at the desolate sea, and finally at her friend. The choice was a phantom, an illusion. She knew, with a sinking heart, that if Rachel went to that house, she would follow. Not out of curiosity, not out of bravery, but because the tether between them was the only thing holding her to her own humanity. She sighed, the sound lost to the rising wind, and followed Rachel down the rotted pier. As her boots hit the wood, the boards groaned under her weight, a low, guttural sound that seemed to vibrate up through the soles of her shoes and settle in her marrow. Wait, Sarah called out, her voice barely audible over the sudden, unnatural silence that fell over the harbor. Rachel stopped, turning back. Her silhouette was framed against the island's dark mass, her face obscured by the gathering mist. For a split second, Sarah thought she saw a reflection of the house in Rachel's eyes, a sprawling, dark geometry that didn't belong in the eyes of a living person. She blinked, and it was gone. Rachel was just Rachel, smiling a thin, sharp, adventurous smile. We're going to be okay, Sarah, Rachel said, reaching out a hand to help her onto the boat. We're just going to take a look, and then we'll leave. It's just an old house. Sarah took the hand, and as their skin touched, she felt a flicker of static, a cold, biting shock that made her pull back. She stared at their joined hands, the connection feeling heavier, more binding than it had ever been. She boarded the boat, the wood slick with moss, and watched as Rachel began to untie the ropes. The engine sputtered, coughed, and roared to life, a mechanical intrusion in the deafening quiet. As they pulled away from the dock, the town of Oakhaven disappeared into the gray haze, leaving them adrift in a void of water and mist. Sarah sat in the stern, clutching the gunwale. The water beneath them wasn't churning, it was smooth, black, and reflective, like a mirror held up to the face of something dead. As they approached the island, the manor seemed to grow larger, rising out of the mist like a monolith. Its windows were dark, hollowed-out sockets staring down at them with a malevolent, judging intent. Sarah looked at the house, then back at the open sea behind them. The path back was already gone, swallowed by the shifting, unnatural fog. We're here, Rachel breathed, her voice filled with a reverence that made Sarah's skin crawl. The boat bumped against the jagged rocks of the island's landing. Sarah didn't move. She felt the threshold looming, an invisible line they were about to cross, one that would divide the world they knew from the one that had been waiting for them all along. The air on the island was thick, heavy with the smell of wet stone, old blood, and something else, something distinctly, unmistakably, like a predator's den. Rachel stepped onto the wet, slick rock, her boots finding purchase with ease. She turned to Sarah, extending her hand once more. Don't look back, Rachel said softly. There's nothing left for us back there anyway. Sarah looked at the outstretched hand, the dark silhouette of the manor looming high above them, and realized with a sickening clarity that she was right. They weren't just visitors. They were ingredients. And they were finally home. The silence of the Blackwood shoreline was not the silence of nature, it was a pressurized vacuum. As Rachel's boots crunched against the shale and pulverized bone of the beach, the air felt thick, heavy with the metallic tang of ozone and old, stagnant salt. Sarah scrambled off the boat, her fingers still trembling from the crossing. She didn't let go of Rachel's hand, her grip tight enough to turn her knuckles white. She looked back at the fisherman, but the man had already turned the skiff around, his motor snarling as he retreated into the gray curtain of the mist without a single backward glance. He didn't even wait for a tip, Sarah murmured, her voice thin against the vast, oppressive quiet. Rachel didn't answer. She was already staring upward, her head tilted back, her eyes tracing the jagged silhouette of the manor looming on the bluff above. It didn't look like a building. It looked like a splintered tooth jutting out of the earth's rotting gum. The ivy clinging to the stone wasn't green, it was a bruised, sickly violet, coiled around the crumbling masonry like veins. Rachel, wait, Sarah whispered, pulling on her friend's arm. Look at the way the light hits it. There shouldn't be shadows that dark at noon. It's wrong. It's Gothic, Sarah. It's supposed to be moody, Rachel replied, though her voice lacked its usual sharp confidence. There was a faint tremor there, a hairline fracture in her enthusiasm. She stepped toward the narrow, winding path that led from the beach to the manor's front steps. We didn't come all this way to stand on the pebbles and critique the architecture. The journal said the foundation was laid in 1780. Imagine what's buried under those floors. Maybe things that were buried for a reason, Sarah countered. She scanned the tree line. The trees here were stunted, their branches twisting back on themselves as if recoiling from the manor. I have a bad feeling, Ratch. A really bad one. My skin feels like it's too tight. Can we just take pictures from the perimeter and go back? Rachel turned. For a second, the light caught her eyes, and they looked wide, almost feverish. You're the one who always keeps us grounded, but don't you see it? This is it. This is the source of every ghost story, every vanishing, every cold sweat the townspeople have had for a century. We're standing on the precipice of history. We're standing on a grave